Good morning and welcome back to the Housing Assembly 2021. I'm Karen Percy, I'm your MC for today. Day 2 features yet another great lineup of speakers and presenters. I'm coming to you from the lands of the Bunurong and the Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation. I would like to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and we're all coming from different parts of Australia, and I pay my respect to the elders of all of the lands on which we are gathering today in this virtual conference. Please feel free to write in the chat where you're coming from. Yesterday, we had a brilliant start to the conference with a range of incredible conversations. And to reflect on day one, I'd like to bring Dr. Katrina Rayner in. She's postdoctoral research fellow in affordable housing at the Faculty of Architecture, Building and Planning at the University of Melbourne. We're going to be talking about day one. Welcome, Katrina.
Thank you so much. Good morning.
I was really struck yesterday by Sarah's story. She was the woman who was finally moving into her own home in Melbourne. You interviewed her. What is the biggest change that is going to make in her life?
Yeah, it was so wonderful to get to share Sarah's story yesterday. And I feel incredibly privileged to have interviewed her at the time that I did, because I spoke to her the day after she found out that she'd be moving into her own home after 25 years living in a boarding house. She's a woman in her 60s. She spent quite significant chunks of her life in really insecure housing situations and in homelessness. So this is this massive fundamental change that is occurring for her right now. And I think for me, the main takeaway I've had several conversations with her now. One of the key takeaways for me is this idea of freedom, and freedom to do things that the majority of us would take as absolutely, very basic, completely for granted. And some of the things that she spoke about was, the freedom to have her laptop in her own home rather than in a locker at school, so it won't be stolen. The freedom to have a friend to visit her in her own home, the freedom to have a carer from her NDIS package actually come to her house, because living in that boarding house, she never felt safe having anyone visit her. So suddenly there's this whole range of things, the freedom to wear shorts or a dress without feeling afraid that you'd be attacked, just these very fundamental basic human rights that she hasn't felt have been available to her, that suddenly have opened up in her life. So I think for me, for Sarah, this notion of freedom, this notion of dignity and safety is massive, and will really lead to emotional, physical and mental healing for her in a really profound way. So it was beautiful to be able to share that insight into her life. And I think just generally speaking, including the voices of people with lived experiences is really important. And I'm really glad that not just Sarah, but a number of people who are speaking in today's program are experts by experience. And it's wonderful to have their insights into this topic.
Absolutely. The detail she gave, and you could just feel the joy when she was talking about those elements. We heard so many great ideas on reforming the housing sector in Australia. There was the social value toolkit that is being prepared for architects that's been coming out of the UK, for example. Many flexible, functional, affordable, even reusable projects for housing in Vienna, in Austria. What are the ideas that we've heard so far that you think most easily could translate to Australia?
Yeah, I loved how geographically diverse we were in our presentations yesterday, from Singapore to Austria to Canada, all over the place. And I think the social value toolkit is something that could move across immediately. We have amazing architects, amazing scholars, amazing government representatives who all have the skill sets that we need to build something like that. And so I think that would be, easy and valuable to pursue immediately in our context. And I think that Vienna is always such an incredibly inspiring city to look to. And most of the conversation tomorrow will be on this idea of demonstration projects and how they can lead to change, to positive influence in our built environment and in our housing design. And so I think that's something that we're moving rapidly towards as well, is this idea of trialing new beautiful ways of doing housing, delivering housing, and then scaling that up. So I think both of those things are immediately transferable. But the major thing for me that I want to to focus on in transferring across is this idea of being aspirational. And I think in Australia, we've really been stuck in this mindset for the last few decades of thinking about social housing as something that's very expensive, about something that we can't have, that's something that people should be grateful for if they get anything, but we don't need to focus on doing it well. And because of that, we've seen a massive decline in the proportion of our housing that is social housing. And so what I loved about hearing Kurt speak last night was this, self-evidence that social housing has a societal benefit and has, broader benefits. It's not just a cost. So I would like to transfer across this idea of aspiration and of value and of quality and of scale. That would be my major takeaway.
I was really struck by Kurt's that statistic that 80% of people in Vienna have the right to access social housing, not just the very poorest of the poor. I found that really quite striking. It's interesting when you talk about it being expensive, because yesterday there were also some really interesting ideas put forward about funding and financing social housing, and also finding out the difference between the two. There was the idea of setting up a special future fund for social housing, affordable housing. There was, creating a private-public partnership for affordable housing. What would you like to see happen based on what we've been hearing?
Yeah, I really enjoyed that presentation from Brendan Coates from the Grattan Institute yesterday, which was presenting this idea of the Special Future Fund. And I haven't looked at it in depth. That's on my to-do list for next week. But based on that presentation, what I really like about the notion of setting up a federal $20 billion endowment is that it's big. And what we need to talk about is that we need to build another 700,000 social housing units in the next 20 years if we're to meet our social housing demand, which is massive, which is much more than we've been building in the past. And the benefit of having a special future fund that is big, that is consistent, that is not tied to political cycles. And to build on that, Brendan was talking about that federal funding being matched by state governments. So there's even more there, there's even more buy-in, is incredibly appealing. Because when we think about the scale of what we need to do, what we need is really large interventions. And I think involving the private sector is important, and there's skills there, and there's definite benefits to that. But when we're talking about which actors have the largest capacity to make things change, who have accountability tied to them, and the levers to pull to make this a consistent policy environment and a consistent funding environment, I'm really excited about this notion of that special future fund, and I'd like to know more about it. So I tend to believe all parties should come to the party, because the problem is huge. We need everyone. But yes, something that can do something at scale is what we need to be pushing for at the moment.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Katrina, for your thoughts. Now, if you didn't get a chance to see all of those sessions yesterday, they are being recorded, so you will have a chance to go back and have a look at them. You will be able to catch up as such. And we do have another packed agenda today, and the focus this time is on the human elements of housing. To begin in a moment, we will move to our opening panel discussion, Housing as an Infrastructure of Care. And we'll also be following that with discussion circles, where you are going to be able to choose your own adventure. Pick the room that you wish to join in on the conversation. Now, in the meantime, we're still looking for lots of input for you. And if you're only joining us for the first time today, please familiarize yourself with the platform. To the right of the screen is the chat function, where you can share resources, make some comments, share anything you like. And below that is then the questions section. So when there's a Q&A element, you're able to put your questions in there. So share resources, please chat throughout the session, and lodging those questions via the question button. You'll also have a chance, even if you're not lodging questions, to like or to vote for or to heart some of the questions, and they'll be the ones most likely to be asked. So we also are really keen for you to share what's happening inside this conference with the outside world, particularly on social media if you can. So whatever your choice of platform is, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, whatever it might be, TikTok, hey, we'd love you to get on TikTok. If you do want to share your thoughts and your ideas to a wider audience, please use the hashtags #affordable housing, #housing assembly 2021, and #social value of housing. And finally, should you need any technical support, please search for event support on the top right chat inbox, and one of the event staff will be here to assist you. So if you're navigating it for the first time, you'll be pushed into some areas, but if you do have some problems, just make sure, go into the lobby, figure out where the technical help is. And now it is time to move to our morning session, Housing as an Infrastructure of Care, and it really is an incredible lineup of speakers. So this should happen automatically, but if you do have any problems, use the event support function. I'll see you a little later.